encounters a bunch of metallic spherical UAP. A certain 3 to 6 of them break off and they surround this F-22, frighteningly close to the cockpit, apparently. They do a semicircle around him and escort him out of the area.
How can I help? How can I be useful in ending needless suffering? Do not be afraid of work that has no end.
We have to organize a social movement.
We have an opportunity to lead by example versus just talking, hot air. I think the more people in this fight, the more we grow. Eventually it could change. You know, the people are the ones that can make the change.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Change Agents, an Ironclad original, presented by our spicy friends at Firecracker Farm. Today's episode is about the possibility of underwater UAPs, or Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. Another term used is USO, Unidentified Submerged Objects. Try to get those acronyms out there up front because we use them throughout the episode. We're going to be talking about them, their bases, potentially, secret government programs, and other claims made at recent congressional hearings based on UFOs, UAPs, and USOs with Richard Dolan. Mr. Dolan is a researcher. He is an author and a historian who has focused his work on studying UFOs or UAPs or USOs. He frequently appears in documentaries and TV shows, and he has his own YouTube channel called Richard Dolan Intelligence Disclosure. Let's get into it. Going into the Wayback Machine, how did UFOs or UAP, the term seems to be changing, how did this first hit your radar?
For me personally?
Yeah,
about 30 plus years ago, I was on a different career path. I was working to become a professor of history at some university, and my interest, I've always had pretty wide-ranging interests, but I did a lot of European history, a lot of European international studies, European diplomacy, and then I switched over to U.S. Cold War strategy and diplomacy in my very early 30s. So I was studying a lot of the Harry Truman administration, or origins of the Cold War and so forth. And I was enjoying that. That was actually quite interesting to me. And I was actually doing a doctoral dissertation on Truman's 1950 strategy toward the Soviet Union and the Cold War. There's a document called NSC 68, which is a kind of an important Cold War document at the time. Anyway, I was doing a thing on that. And then I went into a bookstore and I saw a book called Above Top Secret by Timothy Good, who's a very excellent UK writer. And the subtitle was what caught my attention. It was The Worldwide UFO Cover-Up. And now this is the early 90s. I knew nothing of importance about UFOs at that time, but I'd heard about it like everyone else, heard claims of a cover-up. And I remember flipping through the book, and it's a very good book. And I thought, oh, he's done work here. Is this true? Is there interest by the CIA, by U.S. Air Force intelligence, by Navy intelligence in this phenomenon? Because even if they were interested and figured it out at some point that it was prosaic, why would that not be in any of the history books I've read? It's an interesting thing. You're in early Cold War and you've got people actually wondering about these flying saucers. I would say that's very interesting. And so on that basis alone, I thought, let's look into it. Let's decide what I think. I didn't like having a big question mark hanging over my head in an area where I wanted to be an expert. So I bought that book. I bought a bunch of other UFO books. And the next thing I knew, I was in the rabbit hole. So I was down the rabbit hole pretty quickly. Originally, I thought I would just take 2 or 3 months out of my life to resolve this issue just purely for myself. What did I think? Would I have an opinion on if someone were ever to ask me about UFOs and so forth? But the problem with it was that one deep dive led to other questions that were unresolved, and those led to many more questions. And essentially, it was a matter of, okay, it does look like from the 1940s onward, U.S. military high command was in fact very interested in this problem, even though they said they weren't. Why? What did they think this was? And so you go through the early documents and ask yourself, what were they saying about it? And you discover, oh, There was actually quite a few declassified through FOIA military reports that describe pretty fascinating encounters. Air Force pilots encountering solar white discs that fly under their plane, and the pilot feels a bump as it goes underneath. It's like, what the hell was that in 1951? Or a CIA memo to the director of the CIA from his head of scientific intelligence in 1952 that says sightings of unexplained objects at high altitudes and high speeds in the vicinity of sensitive U.S. installations are of such nature that they are not attributable to natural phenomena or known types of aerial vehicles. That's a pretty straightforward statement. And, you know, when you read enough of these, you start to think the public persona of these flying saucers is very different than what was being discussed within the classified world. And so that's what got me hooked. And I thought I can't simply go forward with this very conventional academic career that I thought I had planned out for myself when I have this unbelievable, fascinating mystery right here in front of me, and I want to get to the bottom of it. So as a result of that, I wrote my first book, which was called UFOs and the National Security State. And it's a history. It's about 500 pages covering from the early 1940s to the early 70s. It's a very simple strategy. I tried to find all of the good UFO cases, particularly military ones, but also civilian, that I personally thought were good. And also tried to track the U.S. government's policy about this. And at the same time, trying to track, I guess you could say, the development of what we would call ufology, or the study of this. What did we think about this? Did we have any ideas? Is it men from another planet? Is it something interdimensional, whatever? And that was my very first book. To my satisfaction, I think it showed that there is a UFO cover-up, without a doubt. Did it mean that they were aliens or not? Well, that I kind of left open. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's any question that there was and has been very great secrecy on this matter. And I've just followed up over the years. It changed my life, you know, going into this field. It completely threw a monkey wrench in what I thought I was going to be.
Have you found in your research that other countries, probably easier to track first world countries, other first world countries are having these same experiences and are, using your words, covering them up to the same degree? And is there collusion between nation states?
Yeah, I think definitely yes. Now, the thing about the other countries, first world countries, so leave out Russia and China for the moment. We'll talk about Europe and, let's say, South American countries. They're all under U.S. domination, so they're client states, realistically. So you think of the Five Eyes relationship with U.S., Britain, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. Yeah, Five Eyes, but the U.S. is always first among equals. And that's the way it is, I think, with all of these types of considerations relating to UFOs or UAP. So, for example, Brazil might have an object that comes down in its territory, which it did. Peru can have an object that comes down in its territory. Britain can have objects that come down in its territory. Now, in the case of Britain, I don't know if they retained their hardware or not, but in the case of Peru, in the case of Brazil, other places like that, the U.S. gets on the scene and they acquire these things. So there's a lot of coercion involved. It would be very difficult for another nation to jump outside of the U.S. orbit. You remember when Snowden's leaks came out about 10 years ago, and we learned, among many other things, that the then president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff, had her phone monitored by NSA. Mm-hmm. Everything that she said, we knew. So imagine you're the leader of another country like that, and you're like, the U.S. conspiracy on UFOs is BS, man. Whatever. We're gonna blow the lid on that. Well, you better be very careful and probably whisper in the other person's ear and write everything in pencil and paper, because the NSA is going to know, and you're not really going to be able to work outside of without the United States knowing. So there's that. Now there's Russia, there's China. With Russia, we know, especially in the days of the Soviet Union, they had many outstanding UFO reports. There's no question about this. It's harder to get full confirmation of many of them because you're dealing with the Soviet Union. You're dealing with a society back then that really did not allow for open discussion and reporting of this phenomenon for most of its period until the very end. But what you had instead was a lot of people talking quietly. And we do have many statements and books and documents from Soviet UFO researchers who are, I think, quite good at what they do. And so we know that the Soviets had their own many dramatic military encounters and civilian encounters as well. So it's worldwide. I'm doing a very substantial, completing a study of USOs, that is water-based UFO phenomena, UAP. And I'm breaking it into 3 volumes because it's just too much in one. Each volume will be about 400 pages. The first one's coming out, I think, this month. It's nearly 700 cases, and I can definitely tell you there's a bias toward U.S. reporting U.S. cases because we make most of the reports. We just have a very good infrastructure for reporting this type of thing. But the reports are worldwide. They're from every region of the world. They're from every body of water. They involve pretty much every nationality you can think of. There's a lot of American cases, but there's a lot of European cases. There's some African cases. There's a number, many from the Far East, whether Russian or Japanese or Australian, Indonesian, many from the Persian Gulf, very interesting area there. So Arctic Ocean, quite a few. They're pretty much everywhere. So I think we're dealing with a global phenomenon by something that clearly acts as though it's intelligent, adaptive, that it's working with, it's got some kind of policy going on. It's got a program. And that to me is very interesting and it's probably the most speculative of all of the aspects of this. But, you know, at a certain point, you have to ask who are they and what are they doing? What's their goal? Because it's not the Russians, it's not the Chinese, it's not a foreign nation or adversary or anything like that. I don't believe that.
What would you say the ratio is for an above ground or above surface sighting versus the USOs, unidentified submerged objects? Are they equal or does one outnumber the other?
No, the aerial sightings are vastly more common. Vastly more. It's not even close. So a lot of folks will say, oh, yeah, 50% of all of these sightings have to do with water. I hear this a lot. I don't really see statistics to support that claim. Now, having said that, there are many. Water is significant. It's very significant, I'm convinced. But in terms of the number, the sheer quantity, I've gone through tens of thousands of UFO reports for this USO study that I'm doing. And most are just, they're not water related. You know, there's a lot of weeding out. And then even when they are potentially water related, they're not necessarily in the water. A lot of times they're above the water and maybe they went into the water at some point, but I can't know that. So in terms of actual USO water-based reports, they're relatively rare, but they're not so rare that they never happen. You know, even in from the 1950s onward, there've been a lot, and I'll get 20 a year on average since the 1950s and 60s. There's at least 20 per year. Doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, compared with UAP reports, but they're tough to get these things. I mean, you know, as you were saying, we are landlubbers. We're not usually out in the middle of the ocean, and then if you are, like if you're in U.S. Navy and you're out in the middle of the Pacific or the Atlantic, yes, you may have an encounter, but then are you going to be easily able to talk about it? Frequently, when you look at the Navy reports, they're often written by Navy guys who've retired, and they're like either anonymous, frequently anonymous. They may sometimes give their name, but they will almost inevitably say, this is what happened to me 20-something years ago when I was aboard this ship in this body of water, and I feel that I can now discuss it. That's not an unusual situation.
It doesn't surprise me. All right, let's fast forwarding to near real time right now. There was a recent unidentified anomalous phenomena exposing the truth hearing. And I'm curious as to what it seems as if these discussions and hearings are coming to the forefront more frequently. And I'm curious your thoughts as to why and what is driving that.
It's a very interesting development indeed. You know, there's been a long history of failed attempts by members of Congress to open the subject up, going back really to around 1960, 61. And those attempts failed. There's another series of attempts that happened in the early 1990s with a representative from New Mexico, Stephen Schiff, relating to Roswell. He got completely stonewalled total failure. And now here we are 30 years later again, and it's a little different now. So now you have quite a bit of momentum from various members of Congress. It's not just one or two people, it's quite a few, even a few in the Senate. They are stirred on this because really what we have had in the last decade is a kind of, you could say, a bit of an insurgency within the national security community on this matter. There have always been factions. It's always been the case. Even in the 1950s and 60s, there was always a kind of anti-secrecy faction that military people identified. But today, you know, what is it? Is it that we have an internet and we have a much more free exchange of information? I think that's a big part of it, frankly. And that we've hit a kind of critical mass so that within a certain group that are of individuals with high security clearances, people like Christopher Mellon, former high-level DOD executive, people like Dr. Hal Puthoff, who's someone I've known for over 20 years, who's high level of clearances for a long period of time, Luis Elizondo, and quite a few others. They've been, and Dr. Eric Davis, these people have been able to get the attention of members of Congress and of the media, and they've succeeded where other attempts have failed. One thing that happened is, you know, a few years before we had any open hearings, there were closed hearings that were given to members of Congress, notably by Dr. Eric Davis. Many people don't know who he is, but he's a very brilliant man, very much read into a lot of this information, and I think was very upfront with members of Congress about the reality of acquired non-human technology and crash retrievals and things like this. So it's been a growing matter, and what it looks like to me, I am in touch with some of these members of Congress. I think they're angry. Some of them are, at having been locked out of something that they were led to believe was nonsense for years. And they're now thinking, wait a minute, it's actually not nonsense. And this stuff is valuable. We're talking technology that essentially is the future. If nothing else, we want to know about it. And why haven't we been consulted on it? So there's a little bit of that going on with some of these members of Congress. And I think we're getting to a point now where not just popular culture is recognizing that this is probably real, but I think it's really filtering on up to higher levels of the intelligentsia and we can say the power elite, where they're more and more willing to recognize that this seems absolutely real. So I think that's the thing. Tim Gallaudet, Admiral, was one of the witnesses there. I'm friends with him. I correspond with him. He's interested in my work on USOs. And he's a good example. Like he's an admiral. He's not had a direct USO sighting, but he's spoken to a number of people that he clearly feels are credible. I've discussed these things with him. He did discuss to Congress, you know, military covering up of what later became the Go Fast video, one of the 3 videos that was released in 2017. Gallaudet was there when he was brought in to look at this video, and he described how the whole thing was scrubbed the next day off the servers. And he's like, oh, this must have been someone's special access program that we weren't supposed to know about. But so there's more and more people willing to talk about it. I think there's more individuals willing to realize this isn't just a career-ending, ridiculous subject anymore. There is something to it. And, you know, it's taking our society a bit of time before we can actually come to the dramatic psychological realization that there's probably some other intelligence that's here. It's easy to recognize that from a distance. It's easy to say, oh yeah, UFOs are real. But here's what I think. Imagine sitting alone in a room with one of these beings. So let's say they have twice your intelligence and they can read your mind. There might be very few things more intimidating than that. You know, like that's not a fun prospect, really. It's like it's intimidating, and there's probably a lot of that's going on. Like I think they would be probably psychologically overwhelming to a lot of people.
God, I haven't thought about it from that perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, do you need a gift idea for somebody that you love, or do you just want to treat yourself? Well, I have one for you. Firecracker Farm hot salt is an absolutely awesome gift. It is delicious, it's handcrafted, it's beautifully packaged, and it's unlike anything else that is out there. Everybody who tries it absolutely loves it. Firecracker Farm has different flavors and heat levels like Pineapple Express and hotter stuff if that's what you're into, and their limited run buddy batches, the Apocalypto and Snake Eater. There's something for everybody. It's made with love, and a percentage of every sales goes to OP300 and the Pipe Hitter Foundation. There is one drawback, and that is you might not be able to get them. Firecracker Farm is a very small family business, and Alex can only make so much at a time. So there is a chance that they're going to run out. And once you get your hands on one of these grinders, you're going to understand exactly why they can't make them in batches. This is a handcrafted grinder with an amazing salt inside of it. If cost is your main concern, worry not. There are hundreds of thousands of servings per package, which is way cheaper than any sauce. And it's not going to over flavor like a lot of sauces traditionally do. If you are ready to upgrade your culinary game and get your hands on one of these amazing grinders yourself, use the code Ironclad, all one word, all capital, to get 15% off your first order at firecracker.farm.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at this, and again, my personal beliefs count for exactly nothing other than my personal beliefs, but I mean, we struggle to describe the size of the known universe. I mean, what level of hubris is required to think that we are the only intelligent beings that are out there, a speck on the freaking, in a twinkling horizon of stars. I want it to be true. I 100% want it to be true. I feel like if they were going to wipe us off the face of the earth, they probably would have already. I definitely am not volunteering to sit in a room with one of these things if that were to happen. Even though every room I go into, I assume that basically people are double my intelligence and likely can read my mind. So that would be less startling to me.
Yeah. There are people who could handle it better than others, and I would think someone with a high level of mental discipline would be the kind that you'd need to deal with them. So it's very likely that different types of military training would be helpful.
Yeah.
For this type of thing.
Was there anything in that most recent hearing, the UAP Exposing the Truth hearing, that came out that surprised you, that you really considered to be any type of breaking information?
Yeah, a couple of things I think were actually quite useful. It's funny, you try to follow the UAP blogosphere and all the people writing on Twitter, X, and so forth, and they love to bitch. They're really happy about saying, there's nothing there, it was all a waste of time. That really wasn't true. It wasn't a waste of time. There was hot air. There were platitudes. Yes, absolutely. But there was also very relevant information. Luis Elizondo, I think, wins the competition for the most relevant things said during this. Lou, on one occasion, was asked by Representative Tim Burleson of Missouri about a very important story, and I'm glad Burleson mentioned this. It is the claim that during the 2007-2008 OSAP years, it's the first iteration of what became ATIP, that there was an attempted transfer of non-human technology from Lockheed Martin to Bigelow Aerospace. Now, Bigelow Aerospace was the primary contractor to the OSAP program under the DIA. Robert Bigelow is very good friends with Senator Harry Reid. Reid was really the sponsor of all of this OSAP program. And so what we learned about a week before the hearing, in a bit of very good journalism, was that it looks as though Lockheed Martin was going to transfer non-human technology to Bigelow Aerospace, and that was blocked twice by a senior CIA executive named Glenn Gaffney. So I was very glad when Burleson asked Luis Elizondo, who was at OSAP at this time, if he knew about the story and was it true. And Elizondo essentially said, yes, this was a really important confirmation. He said, from my, a lot of qualifications, of course. My understanding is that it was blocked. Why, I cannot surmise. He wouldn't want to put himself out there. But he gave, I think, very good support to this story. And in fact, gave a lot of support to it. Go through the transcript. So this is interesting. And it makes me think, what was the original purpose of OSAP? It wasn't just a study of the Skinwalker Ranch. It wasn't just a study of UFOs in general. It was very possibly an attempt to unburden Lockheed from its cache of NHI technology, because apparently, according to this account, Lockheed didn't want it anymore. Lockheed had gotten it back in the 1950s. Maybe they'd studied all that they could. Maybe it was becoming a burden for them. I don't really know, but this is what it may look like. So that was an interesting thing that came out in the hearings. The other interesting thing that came out, I would say, is the submission of the Immaculate Constellation document by journalist Michael Shellenberger. Many people have heard of this. I did my own plain English analysis of it the other day on my channel. Essentially, it is said to be, and it's debated, the Pentagon denies that it exists, of course. There are people who say it looks fake. Doesn't look fake to me, but we have to confirm it, to be fair. But it's an alleged insider statement about a program seemingly ran out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I'm not sure if they really confirmed that. But essentially a UFO, UAP data collection, massive umbrella program that is now using all kinds of AI machine learning algorithms to find out where the hiding places are, predict movements of these UAP and things like this. And it's one of the interesting things in the document that was submitted to Congress, and which you can download, it's on the website of Representative Nancy Mace, is it describes some very engaging, interesting UAP and military encounters that allegedly occurred with USOs or UAP. And some of them are quite shocking and dramatic. One, undated, concerned an F-22 on eastern U.S. seaboard on some kind of routine patrol, encounters a bunch of metallic spherical UAP. A certain 3 to 6 of them break off and they surround this F-22 pilot. And one comes frighteningly close to the cockpit, apparently. They do a semicircle around him and escort him out of the area. He's on patrol. He gets escorted out of the area by these UAP. That's one of the accounts in this Immaculate Constellation document. The real question is it true?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have to, it's not that much more outrageous than many other confirmed military encounters that I have come across through FOIA. So it's not out of the blue, but we definitely want to get some confirmation, and hopefully we'll be able to do that.
I also think we have to take a moment to celebrate the fantastic name Immaculate Constellation. I absolutely, because I used to be involved in some of the naming conventions. For us overseas, they would let us pick our own for a bit, and then because we're absolute fucking children, they stopped us from doing that, and they became computer generated. I'm legitimately being dead serious. We were just idiots. And they realized that if we're going to put things like this on slides and submit them for mission approval, we probably should look a little bit more professional.
Taking the toys away from the kids.
Looking back, with 20 years of life and experience behind me now, probably a good idea that they did that. So it's computer generated, but they're just fantastic when stuff like this comes out. Immaculate Constellation. It's great.
It's crazy. There is a theory as to why it was named what it was, and I'm trying to recall something to do with like pristine evidence covering a wide array of subjects related to UAP. I think it's something like that.
One of the lines of questioning that I found interesting that came up in that hearing was, and I forget who exactly asked it, but the line of questioning was, are any of these things originating from the water? Meaning, entering or departing the water. And then I think that line of questioning was more, the root of it was, is there a possibility that these are actually stationed or based, or whatever term that you would want to use, subsurface? Which, yeah. I'm not a physicist, what it would take for something to travel through space and time to get to our galaxy, probably substantial, as opposed to the distance of, something on the bottom of the ocean, which from my very layman's understanding, we know probably more about the surface of the moon than we do about the ocean.
Maybe.
Yeah. The bottom or the surface of our own ocean. What are your thoughts on the probability of that?
That's a great question. I think the latest statistic that I've learned is that we've done a sophisticated mapping of about 25% of the ocean floor and 5% of the ocean's volume.
Yeah.
And I'm like, 5% of the ocean's volume sounds like a lot to me, but let's just say, okay. So that's what I understand. And that question wasn't really fully answered in any kind of detail during the hearing. I don't know how they could. Even Admiral Gallaudet would not really want to probably dive into that question. But for my own looking at this phenomenon, the water-based part, it actually makes it's been shown to me that there's actually a certain amount of logic for a visitor that comes from elsewhere to want to set up shop under the ocean. It's more of a stable environment in many ways. You've got less temperature fluctuation down there. You've got less pressure fluctuations. You've got less exposure to radiation that might be harmful to you if you're not used to it. And also, if you're observing a highly intelligent, inquisitive apex predator species that's living on the surface, you may want to just kind of stay out of their hair. You may not want to have a lot of interactions with them, and the ocean might be a very good place to do that. So, and if you're able to manipulate space-time metric engineering to some extent, if you're able to do things in terms of physics that you don't yet understand how, maybe it doesn't matter if they're in the ocean or in an underground facility or circling it somewhere in Earth orbit. Maybe the ocean's a good place for them. I could imagine that it would be a pretty decent and secure environment and base of operations.
Attention warriors, are you ready to push your limits and become a stronger, more resilient version of yourself? We've teamed up with MTNTOUGH Fitness Labs to deliver a fitness program designed for those who live by the creed of excellence. Whether you're active duty or a veteran or a hunter or just someone who's ready to tackle the challenges life throws at you. The MTNTOUGH app is your battlefield for building mental toughness, physical strength, and it isn't just a workout program. It's a mission to forge you into a higher-performing athlete, prepared for whatever comes next. We are so confident in this program that we're offering a full year on the app for just $120. Use the code CYBER50, that's all capital letters, all one word, at www.mountaintough.com. That breaks down to just 33 cents a day. Think about it this way. Investing in your fitness is one of the few things in your life that you can control. If you want to be the best, it starts right there. Dig in your truck seat, find the spare change, and commit to your mission of strength and resilience today. There is a redemption link down in the show notes, and the sale starts on the 22nd of November. And the promo code can only be used 1,000 times. First come, first serve. See you there. What's going on, everyone? This episode is also brought to you by Allegiance Gold. Recently, we've witnessed a surge in gold prices, reaching an all-time high of shy of $2,500. An impressive 20% increase in less than a year. In a market where traditional investments are increasingly scrutinized, gold and precious metals have emerged as compelling alternatives. You may ask, why should I invest in gold? Well, I'll give you a few reasons. Gold has long been valued for its stability and ability to preserve wealth across generations. It's a low-risk investment that provides security and balances out more volatile assets, especially during economic downturns. With the US dollar weakening due to rising national debt and inflation, gold acts as a reliable hedge, increasing in value when the cost of living spikes. Furthermore, it remains a crisis commodity that retains worth in times of geopolitical turmoil, as investors often turn to gold when global tensions rise. Finally, gold is a private, tangible asset, offering discretion and liquidity in a digital age prone to data breaches. If you are interested in learning more, go to protectwithandy.com today. Listeners of the show will get an exclusive lowest pricing on the market for select gold bars. That is protectwithandy.com. That'll be in the show notes. Or you can call 844-790-9191 to talk to an account representative. And again, it seems to be, again, from a layman's perspective, just the amount of time and distance required for somebody to get from parts unknown beginning to traveling here. But obviously they would have an advanced knowledge and understanding of science or whatever they may call it to be able to do so. But yeah, putting I mean, it's similar if you put it into the vernacular that we use, Elon Musk looking at putting a settlement on Mars for us to begin to explore from there, as opposed to constantly just sending rockets back and forth, which would be required to establish the settlement. But at some point, it would become self-sustaining. Seems like it would be more efficient.
I think, yeah, it totally makes sense to me that you would want to have a kind of base, a colony. We can even use that phrase. And I suspect that's what the case is. I know I'm bouncing around a lot here, but one thing I do like to track are just the vast bulk of UFO, UAP reports that happen every year. And there are a couple of pretty good databases from which I can look at them. One is called the MUFON database. That's the Mutual UFO Network. They're an organization. They get 6,000 plus sightings a year that they record. Another is the National UFO Reporting Center, which is totally open source, and you can go there. It's a good place to go for these things. And he gets another 6,000-7,000 a year. That's North America alone. So more than 10,000 a year are raw reports in North America. We've got less than 5% of the world's population here in North America. We know that there are sightings in every other part of the world. We also know that they don't have good reporting infrastructures by and large. And I ask myself frequently, is there a way to kind of get an estimate of how much traffic is out there? Pure wild guesses, I admit, but my own estimate, and I've got my reasons, but I think that we're looking at least 50,000 good sightings a year worldwide, I think would be conservative.
Wow.
I honestly think so. Because most people who see one of these things, they don't report them anyway. I would go to conferences all the time and ask, how many of you people have seen a UFO? Up go the hands. How many of you reported it? Most of the hands go down. Most people don't report these things. I think there's a lot of activity that is just never noted or recorded. And then on top of that, you look at the nature of most of the sightings that people have. Many of them are fleeting. So if you didn't look in the right place, you'd have missed it. If you didn't get up at 2 a.m. to have a smoke or look at the stars, you wouldn't have seen that black triangle over your neighbor's house. And then, watch it move away after looking at it for 5 seconds. These things are elusive. And I think they're elusive for a reason. So I think there's probably more traffic out there than most people realize. And so I don't think 50,000 sightings a year is outrageous at all. And I think there's probably more traffic than that. So what are they doing? I ask myself all the time, what are they doing?
Yeah. Oh, and that ties in. You mentioned Luis Elizondo. In that hearing, I'm just going to read one of the quotes because I find this to be interesting. There is definitely enough data to support that there is some sort of relationship between sensitive U.S. military installations, also some of our nuclear equities, and some of our Department of Energy sites.
Yeah.
And you mentioned at the very beginning, I forget the exact verbiage that you use, but it seems as if they have a not necessarily a pattern of behavior. I can't remember the exact word that you used, but why do you think that there is this connection between the military and the nuclear and DOE sites? And there's a lot of overlay, obviously, between DOE and nuclear sites.
It's very important. So I realize a lot of your listeners probably don't know the first thing about what I've researched, and they're like, UFOs, what's up with this? I understand that. And forgive me, because I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I'm now at the point where I've happily come up with my own theories about why this is all happening. So I'm going to share that with you here. I think that we are subject to widespread visitation at this time. It's not that there may not have been a monitoring program in effect earlier by some more advanced intelligence that noticed us, these intelligent standing up primates that we are. But it's once we discovered science and once we discovered, I think, serious technology that we started getting attention. And I only say this because when I look at the history of good sighting reports, they jump up in the 18th, 19th century, and then they really explode during the Second World War. And it's not just because we have better tech to observe them. People in ancient times were outdoors, they were intelligent, they had the ability to look up, and there just wasn't much of this written down. Now, we're better at writing and all of that, yes, but I do think that the phenomenon has qualitatively changed since World War II. And why? I think it's because if they have the ability to observe us, they're looking at this intelligent, inquisitive, assertive species that we are, that has discovered science, we've discovered nuclear technology, we've discovered quantum physics, we've discovered artificial intelligence and everything else, computers. So we've very quickly, like this, gotten the keys to the kingdom, and we're about to leap into their world. That's what I really think. So they're watching us. I don't know if they support what we do. I don't know if they're opposed to what we're doing. I don't really know. It could be that we've brought a lot of the neighborhood in to watch, for all I know. It's really not that outrageous for me to think. And then why would they be hands off? Why would they not just announce themselves? Well, it could be to what we were discussing earlier. It could be like they might realize we cannot handle them. We think we can. We're very arrogant. We're very sure of ourselves. Oh, we can handle aliens. Sure, we can. Maybe not. Maybe not if we have to interact with them, we have to live with one of them. It might be very difficult, and they might think, okay, I don't want to step on the flowers in the garden here because they might not be able to handle us very well. So I think there may be some of that. There may be other things going on that are more nefarious. Totally possible. Totally possible. I mean, there are military encounters that seem potentially hostile, although we're not looking at anything like Independence Day either. So, no blowing up the White House seems to be going on here. So what are they doing? I think they're here because they're watching us. They're watching our development. They're adapting to us as well as we become more and more sophisticated at observing them. So they're looking at us and we're looking at them at the same time. It's a dance. That I think is what's going on. And how this will resolve itself, how it will ultimately play out that's where you want to get the popcorn and get a front row seat, because it's going to be very interesting to see. Will we completely out their presence here in the coming decades or not? I don't know. There's reasons to think both are possible. And if that were the case, would they then say, oh, okay, you got us, here we are. We're going to establish full relationship with you. I'm not sure if that would happen anyway. So it's a tough situation. It's like we're intelligent enough to develop all of these means of exploring our world, of understanding much about our world, of understanding much about the universe. But I think we still have, I was just going to say, I think we have a kind of a fragile psyche at this stage of our development. For us to encounter an alien is not if my cat were to encounter an alien. My cat would probably be fine with it. My cat doesn't have a sense of, this is my identity, this is who I am. Holy crap, I'm dealing with this being that is so much smarter than we would be different. I think we would handle it much worse because we're at this kind of in-between stage in the development of a grand kind of consciousness. Now, this sounds a little new agey, forgive me, but I think evolution happens not simply biologically, but it does happen as a form of consciousness, and we're at this kind of in-between stage, in my opinion.
I feel like as soon as Elon launched a convertible out into space, they needed to double their efforts. They're trying to figure out why somebody would do that.
Elon is he's the real life Batman, isn't he? That guy, he's Bruce Wayne.
Well, was there a correlation at all between UAP phenomena and when humans started playing around first in low Earth orbit and then satellites and then men in space and then to the moon? And as we continue this progression, does there seem to be an uptick in these as well, as almost as if, the situation that you're describing, I mean, to break it down at a very basic level is very similar to a zoo, which human beings, we have these all over the world. We go and we observe species that we can't communicate with, and who knows how much they can see of us, right? But you don't want to go live in the lion cage. You might think you might want to, right? But we as humans are curious in this respect, and we collect things and observe things like this. So to me, it's not a far-fetched to think that we might just not be at the apex of that pyramid scheme, like where we think we are. But I wonder if, as we started to march our way off of our planet, if these type of sightings and oversight increased a little bit.
It looks like it to me. Although there are patterns that I haven't yet really figured out fully. So, for example, in my USO research, for some reason that I haven't yet fully figured out, there was an explosion of encounters during the 1970s. Why the 1970s? And this is pre-internet. So the fact that I have more USO cases from the 70s than any other decade, including the 2010s comes in second. So there's a lot during that decade.
What year did we develop nuclear submarine technology?
The 50s, you know,
Okay.
nuclear powered submarines. 1950 USS Nautilus was the first, I think 1954, I believe. And the Soviets were on our heels. They had nuclear subs out there by the 60s. They were
Okay.
traversing the oceans. So, and you know, the 1960s and 70s, that's when we first put a lot of satellites in orbit, basically. I don't know, for some reason, the 1970s were an enormous decade of sightings, and not just for USOs, but also, I just know from my UFO, UAP research, it was a big, big decade. And I often wonder what was going on. It's not that things stopped in the 80s and 90s, they didn't, but there was something very big happening, and I can't say that I know why. Not sure why. So I suspect that there are patterns having to do with them and their motivations and their programs that are not fully known to us. I don't think that I have a full handle on it. But I do think that much of the activity that we see is, I didn't really fully answer your question before. Why are they interested in our nuclear technology and this and that? They're interested in this because they are in my opinion, they are tracking what we are up to. They are very interested in our technological and scientific progress. I think that's very important for them. I think they want to know what latest iteration of our weapons platforms are capable of, and our communications platforms and things like this. I think they are constantly checking it out. And I say this because there are many, many cases, military encounters again, where these objects seem to come in, hang out, sometimes cause electromagnetic interference as well, but then they take off. It's like they're coming in, quick visit, and they're gone. This has happened in many aviation encounters, and it's happened to our aircraft carriers on a number of occasions. Objects would come in, glowing orange sphere hanging out over the USS John F. Kennedy aircraft carrier in 1971 for 20 minutes, while all communications and weapon systems go offline. That's July 2nd, 1971. And we have a name, a man named James Kopp, who was a communications specialist aboard the USS JFK at that time, and talked in great detail about this. There's no reason not to believe his account, in my view. And to the extent that you can check out what he says, things do check out, they corroborate. So this orange spherical whatever, did it come from below the water? Did it come from above? I don't know. All he knows is he's working communications. They start spewing out gibberish. And he hears on the intercom someone screaming, "It's God. It's the end of the world." And he's like, what is it? He goes out to look. He says, it's nighttime, and there is this thing. It glowed, and it was like these bubbling colors, like the sun. It gave off half the amount of light of daylight, he said. And it was just there. The ship went to battle stations, general quarters, after 30 seconds, and he had to go back to his communication station. But he said for the next 20 minutes, everything was offline.
What's going on, everybody? I want to let you know about an ongoing effort in Western North Carolina to help victims of Hurricane Helene and how you can help our friends at the Sentinel Foundation. The hurricane has displaced people around the region and destroyed countless homes. However, Sentinel is on the ground helping. They've been actively getting critical supplies to residents in some of the area's most isolated locations. They've been able to provide over 60 Starlink systems to fire departments, police departments, and churches so that they can communicate and coordinate for their communities. They've also organized both aircraft and ground units to transport and deliver donations. So far, they've accepted and organized an estimated 7 million pounds of materials and distributed about 4 million pounds to support the ongoing relief efforts. Sentinel has also continued to monitor reports of child trafficking, exploitation within the area of operation through law enforcement. To find out more about their efforts to help hurricane victims and their anti-child exploitation efforts, and to see how you can help, please check out foundationsentinel.org. What do you make of, I hear a lot of people, or communities I should say, their response to UAP, USO would be highly classified military technology, things like they'll use the F-117 as an example, a stealth fighter that was flying for years that we didn't know about until it was publicly released. Is it at the point in your research and the volume of these encounters where you think it is beyond possible that it is just military technology that we don't know about yet?
Pretty much, yes, I think that. The F-117 example I've heard a million times. It's not really even a good example, to be honest with you. But yeah, people have used that to describe. That became operational in 1982, 83. It was classified until I think 1988, 89. The first Gulf War is when I think we started to learn about it, just before. But I mean, think of something like the famous Tic Tac encounter. We all know about this, the Nimitz encounter from 2004. So what do we know about this? You've got Kevin Day, who is running the radar off the Princeton, tracking multiple UAPs for several weeks, describing maneuvers where they're at 80,000 feet, dropping down to sea level within a couple of seconds, incredible speeds, incredible maneuverability, evasive capabilities, while they're doing exercises off the coast of Baja California. And, you know, we're at war at this time. It's 2004. We're doing Afghanistan, we're doing Iraq. This is serious business. Fravor then and his team go out to check out this on November 14th. He sees what looks like a 40-foot long Tic Tac over the water. By the way, there are a lot of folks who said that there was something below the water at this time as well, but let's just leave that aside. He sees this thing, and he's a badass pilot. He goes down to intercept it, to check it out. It comes up to meet him. He says, as he's circling, it's circling. Pretty nifty maneuver, by the way, and then it just takes off faster than a speeding bullet, probably at an estimated speed of about 10,000 miles per hour. Now, okay, so let's just look at that. So if that's a black budget special access program with advanced tech, let's just say, then I'm just going to tell you and your listeners, we've had that tech since the 1940s at a minimum, because we have exactly same types of reports.
Yeah.
Fully confirmed, declassified cases describing objects being tracked at 10,000 miles per hour they had instruments that were sophisticated back then as well. They had the ability to track aerial objects moving at such speeds, and they did. So we've had this for a long time. In my own personal research, I'll never forget, I was in the Canadian National Archives back in 2005. And you can go to Ottawa, capital of Canada, and go through their national archives there. They have UFO reports. So during a certain period of time, Canadian citizens would just write into the government. Government never did anything about those reports. They put them essentially in a circular file, but now you can read them at the archives. One report came from an elderly man writing in the early 80s. I'll never forget this. Cool guy. He had done service in the Canadian military. They didn't include his name and his service record because that was personal. But I read his handwritten note. He said, back in 1936, I was 25 years old. I had a job flying for the Canadian government, doing aerial reconnaissance of the Great Northern Territories, mapping. I mean, if you're the government of Canada in 1936, you now have the ability to fly over there and get some good topographical maps. So that was his job. He had a pontoon plane, could land on the water. Cool job for a 25-year-old kid. He said he described where he was. Vastly, vastly remote northern, one of the infinite lakes of Canada up there. And he said, I was doing a pre-flight check, and I just looked up. It's 1936. He said above me was a elongated object, gunmetal gray, no reflection, shaped like a Tic Tac. He didn't use that phrase, but that's how he described it. He said I couldn't tell how large it was because there was no clouds, nothing to gauge it against. But he got a good look at it, apparently. It was in a north-south configuration. He watched it rotate to east-west and instantly accelerate. He said it was at the horizon in a moment. I mean, it sounded exactly like Fravor's Tic Tac encounter, but this is 1936.
Yeah.
And I could look at that and say, well, that's not confirmed. But, you know, why the hell would this guy? He's just making this up. He's this nice Canadian man writing with his perfect penmanship years after the fact because he wanted the government to know that this happened. That's really what he did. And there's lots of these types of things. So I don't think anyone would say that's a black budget technology. Was there a breakaway Tesla group that was able to figure this out and just happened to be above this guy in the middle of nowhere? Place is called Lake Aylmer, Aylmer. I would encourage people to look it up. You'll gasp when you see how remote it is. This thing was above him, so it clearly was aware of him and checking him out. I'm assuming it was curious about him. What's this guy doing up here in his tiny little airplane? What's that? And they were looking at him for some reason. So, so to answer your question, black budget tech, yes, we all know there is black budget tech. There is the ours, theirs problem. This has been discussed for many, many generations now. Are these things built by us or not us? I gave you a really long-winded answer, but I would just say there is a certain proportion, I think, that is ours. Yes. And there's a definite proportion that is not ours, and which makes sense. Let's say you're Harry Truman. It's 1947. Your top scientists and generals tell you, sir, we've recovered something that doesn't seem to come from these parts. Oh, yeah, and a couple of alien bodies, too. So you have to now decide, what do I do with this information? Do I tell the world? Even if you may think you want to, your advisors will tell you all the reasons why that's a bad idea. You tell the world you've got this tech, now you got the Russians to deal with. They're trying to get nuclear technology. You don't want to share that. Why would you want to share something as exotic as alien tech? No. So what you do is you create a very deeply classified program. You make sure you manage the media. You make sure you manage the politicians. You make sure you manage the academic community, all of that. Yes, that's easier to do than some people think. And then you maybe review your policy every few years. But the fact is, there never turns out to be a good reason to give up the secret. It becomes bigger and deeper and better and more profitable too, because now you start handing things off to private industry, like Lockheed Martin in the 50s and like Raytheon and like Boeing and all the others. And now they're working with you, and now they're developing the future. And now when you retire from your 3-star, 4-star position, you go to work for them in a senior executive capacity, and your clearances go up and better, and you're making more money than ever before.
Yeah.
So it's a great gig for a lot of these people. And I think that's what we're looking at. It's a lot of it's become privatized. And who's really in charge? I mean, it's hard to say who's actually in charge. Does anyone honestly believe that the current United States president, and I'm not trying to get overly partisan here, but does anyone honestly believe that President Biden right now is on top of this matter? Seriously doubt it.
Yeah.
I seriously doubt it. Or really almost any president. I don't want to pick on him alone. Presidents have to be in front of the cameras. They got to shake the hands of dignitaries, kiss the babies, take all of that. There's hundreds of special access programs that go on all the time, not all of which have to do with UFOs, of course. It's very difficult, I think, for a president to be able to manage all of those. And you need deniability for a lot of those. So the question is, who's in charge? And that's a good question. That's something we could spend another several episodes discussing, perhaps.
Yeah, I can see a world, and to me, based on my very limited experience, it's more plausible that things are not being shared with those at the actual top for the deniability, like you said, an air gap in knowledge, deniability, all of those things. And I think that, and this, ties into a question right after the, again, the exposing the truth hearing. Like, I don't know. I don't like that one as much as the Immaculate Constellation, because that one's just top shelf in my book. But Pentagon released a report outlining investigations into recent encounters, and they couldn't explain 21 of them. To me, that's a good trickling of information without exposing too much. And I'm just curious if there's anything that jumped out on that for you of those 21 that they couldn't explain.
I haven't studied these, but not yet. But this new office is the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARROW, and they're having their formal hearing as we're speaking later today in a couple of hours. They've issued their reports. Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't really see much of a difference between them and the old Project Blue Book in a sense. A little more modern, they use a little bit better terminology. They're a little more slick, but essentially an office that's in place to, they are giving the Pentagon line on this straight up, and they have been doing so all along. I know for a fact there are some very, very people close to that, high-level officers and executives who are very dissatisfied with the ARROW office, and they don't believe that it's working in good faith. That's not me saying that. That's a lot of these individuals talking. So I don't really know what their methodology is. I don't know how they're getting their reports. I don't know how they're figuring things out. They've resolved much less than half of the cases that have come to them. I think they're now at the point where they've got a total of over 1,000 cases that have come to them. Quite a few from the period of, I think it's May of 23 to June of 2024 is the last period that they've just issued their report about. What they did say is that these very few cases, these 21 that are unresolved, if I'm getting it right, I think I am. They said, well, we just need, they're insufficient data. They are potentially anomalous. And for us to resolve these would take a lot of resources and time and money. And so I think they're giving the implication that, yeah, they look like they're interesting, but very likely they could be explained conventionally too if we had the wherewithal to do it, which was exactly the old U.S. Air Force line with Project Blue Book for years. They, from 1953 onward, the Air Force was essentially under orders to get the percentage of unknowns as low as possible. And to anything that was a potential balloon became a balloon. Anything that was a potential bird became a bird. And then the line was always, well, some of these are insufficient data, but if we had enough time and resources, we could figure it out. But then when you get into the details, you realize, no, that was absolutely not true.
Yeah, that's a broad explanation that gives you a lot of leeway to explain things that might otherwise be unexplainable. Any hope, January, we got a new administration come in. Trump has said some pretty wild things about opening and releasing information. Any hope that that will actually happen and that the cards will fall onto the table and we can see what we're playing with?
I think it would be a better chance with him than if Harris had won. And I'm not trying to be partisan one way or the other, but I think he's more of, you look at what he's got. He's got Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy doing this Department of Government Efficiency. Very likely they're going to be looking at the scissors, taking their scissors to the Pentagon. I mean, where is there more money being spent than that?
That's not true. They've only never passed an audit. What are you talking about?
They're going to be taking a hard look at it. And no, exactly. And if Hegseth gets approved, which there may be some question about that, I kind of think he's interesting because he's not a 4-star ass kisser to the military industrial complex. Yeah. He's actually a soldier. And he might not have a problem with some of the cuts that you can see that are going to be looked at there. Not that that would succeed, but I guess what I'm saying is with Trump coming in, there's a real possibility of things being shaken up. It's very obvious he's bringing in loyalists, and it's very obvious, at least to me, he's looking at having basically a bureaucratic war with, let's call it the deep state, the swamp, whatever. Yeah. Whether he's going to win or not is another question, but I think it's shaping up to look like that. And so in that kind of a context, you could see some possibilities. If you shake that tree hard enough, some things are going to fall out. And on top of that, here's the other thing. The U.S., you're going to know this better than I do. I've got to think there's a lot of dissatisfaction going on in many aspects of the Pentagon and the U.S. military in general. You have a situation in which policymakers, I'm trying to be delicate here, have put Western military in a lose-lose position. They've clearly lost in Ukraine. There's no question about that. And they lost because they utterly misunderstood the nature of Russia's military capabilities and manufacturing and fabrication industrial capabilities. Totally dismissed it, underestimated, had no idea what they were talking about. And the Russians are proving that they can outproduce on all kinds of weapon systems where it matters on the ground. So the U.S. military, I've got to think there's a lot of unhappy military planners who are annoyed at a bloated and largely ineffective system. I mean, a lot of these aircraft, it seems to me, you look at them the wrong way, they break down, you got to do more repairs on them. Yeah. Are they really as effective? Are the American weapon systems as effective in the field as we like to think? And it doesn't look like necessarily they're doing all that great. So there's a lot of unhappiness. And I could imagine that that could translate into a lot of areas. We're looking at an empire that's cracking apart in some ways. You're seeing the end of a unipolar moment. 30 years. I mean, it's amazing how the U.S. just blew this opportunity. 1991, 92, America was the dog that could pee on anyone's tree and no one could stop it. And That is not the case anymore. And in just 30 years, America has allowed itself to fritter away what was seemingly an insurmountable military and an economic lead. So I think in that kind of a situation, you're looking at a lot of opportunity for things to come out, a lot of unpleasant truths and leaks to occur. And one of them could be within the UAP field. I think it's totally possible. So where this will go is the UFO, or I still say UFO, forgive me. It's a very difficult conundrum because on the one hand, you've got something that really is of legitimate high-level national security interest. We pay you guys to protect the nation. That is your job, and you do it really well. And there's a lot of integrity and honor within the military system, without a doubt. And the job is to protect national security. This is why Lou Elzando and Admiral Tim Gallaudet focus so much on the national security elements of this phenomenon in their witness testimony, as was appropriate. That's their job. That's what they get paid to do. And it's a legitimate concern. When objects are hanging out over sensitive installations, whether they're American or Russian or Chinese, that's important. And so you can understand that there would be a desire for secrecy. At the same time, we're in a world now where the information is spilling out and we just cannot help ourselves. I mean, it's coming out. And the secrecy has been so deep and has done such an end run around our formal constitutional form of government, in my view. The whole thing has been kept secret from members of Congress and probably from much of the executive branch as well, I would think, that the illegality and, dare I say, criminality of much of the secrecy is going to come to light also. And how this is all going to resolve itself, how it would resolve itself is, will be a tangled legal mess, very possibly, and how this will all play out. It's funny. I mean, I thought about this for 30 plus years and I still don't know how this can all play. I wrote a book on this after disclosure. What would happen if the secrecy were to be revealed? I wrote that 14 years ago in a different universe at a different time. My co-author and I thought, well, if it comes out, it'll change the world overnight. And in fact, that's not what's happened. Instead, it's coming out and you're seeing this back and forth, this tug of war. But I think, we're never going to be ready for this truth to come out psychologically, but that's not going to stop it from happening. We're never ready for the big things that happen in our lives, and they happen anyway. So I don't think we have a lot of control over this process. I think it's just happening. And you have people talking about controlled disclosure. Well, good luck with that. I don't know how controlled it's really going to be. Once we get it to a tipping point, I think things are just likely to spill out.
Yeah, you might be able to control the initial drip drop of that, but at some point it's going to become uncontrollable.
I suspect so. There's so many things going on in this world that we're living in now. We're turning ourselves into practically almost a new civilization, a new species practically in the space of a few generations. We're looking at the potential of cybernetic implants, transhumanist genetic modification of the human being, and of a completely centrally, digitally managed micromanagement of the whole global population. I mean, panopticon 24/7. I know what you're doing at all times. You have no privacy for the rest of all time. How will that affect human society, human psychology? We're changing ourselves in such a dramatic way at the same time that we're looking at, and then there's quantum computing and strong AGI and everything else. At the same time, we're now looking at this other problem of these other beings that appear to be here. It's as if we're going through this very fundamental transformation of ourselves as a species over the course of just a few generations. And where we're going to be in another 20, 30, 50 years from now, I think could be a very different place. Yeah. And I struggle to think what it will look like.
Well, what do you want to leave the viewers and listeners with? Came up to the end of our time. What do you want to close it out with?
Well, I'll say this. I mean, I started studying UFOs in the early 90s when it was a completely illegitimate subject for serious thinkers to get into. You know, I had old colleagues in the academic world thinking, Dolan, have you just lost your mind? What's wrong with you? And it was tough. So it's a little different now, but what I can say about this subject is that it has opened more intellectual doors than I could have ever imagined. The UFO subject has so many things about it that you could spend an entire lifetime studying. You could study the history of the sightings. You could study the history of the cover-up, the politics. You can study the history of alleged abduction and encounter cases. Those are fascinating. You could study the science, the crazy, impossible, but real science of these things. Space-time manipulation, telepathic communication. There's got to be a science there. This subject touches upon all of that. You could study the sociological aspects of how it has transformed and changed our own culture and our own society. You could study the interaction between us and what appears to be them, anthropologically, sociologically. How have they adapted to us? Here's a little fun fact. In my USO research, what I've discovered, I did a very big data analysis of my 672 cases. It's a big, I'm not a spreadsheet guy, but I made a big spreadsheet here. And one thing that I learned, came as a surprise, is that there seemed to be almost like flipping a switch. Sightings went from split daytime, nighttime up until the mid-late 1960s, and then they switched to almost all predominantly nighttime, and particularly military ones. So from 1968 onward, all the military USO cases, I think it's like almost 87, 88% are at night. And it seems like a change in behavior. Something changed. Maybe they're adapting. Maybe they're becoming more covert. The point is that there's this aspect to look at, them versus us, the dance. So with UFOs, UAP, there's an incredible range of aspects of this that are absolutely, utterly, incredibly fascinating. And there's no way that I can personally expect that I'm going to solve all of it before I pass on. But it's a good way to keep my time occupied. It's better than many of the other things I could have done with my life and career. It's been the most fascinating thing, and it's humbled me. The UFO subject is a great teacher. I think of it as like a wise man on the mountain. You know, you go up, you climb the mountain, you go into the cave, and you see the guy sitting there and he's meditating. The last thing you do to that guy is say, I want to know everything that you know right now. Like, you don't do that. You go in there with the spirit of humility. That's the UFO subject. It's a teacher, and it takes time. It's not something where you can go in there and think, I'm going to figure it all out in 3 months, which was my fond belief 30 plus years ago. No, doesn't work like that. It's a teacher, and it takes you in deeper and deeper. And you learn about the subject, and you learn about our species, you learn about our society, and you learn about yourself. And it's been a tremendous teacher. And I'm not done. I'm still on my fun little journey. It sometimes makes me feel crazy at times. It's difficult. The community can be a handful. Everyone's sure that they know the answers. But I think we are learning more about it. I will say that I think we are the subject of someone's interest, someone who's able to observe us, pardon me, and is interested in our own development. And the real question to ask is, what is their attitude about what we're doing? I'm still thinking that. I'm still thinking about that. You know, do we have something to worry about or not? Is this a threat? Is it a potential threat or not? I would say maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. And, you know, I need more time. Whether I'll have enough time to figure it out or not, I don't know. But it's been a fascinating journey. I'll say that.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I know for me, it just, as usual, has me scratching my head about our place in the universe. If you'd like to hear more about Richard's work, you can check out his YouTube channel called Richard Dolan Intelligence Disclosure. Thank you again for tuning in to Change Agents, an Ironclad original presented by Firecracker Farm. See you guys all next week with a brand new guest for a brand new episode. See you then.
We don't just do the filmmaking. We do everything. We've taken a case study of over 30 projects that we've done over the past 15 years, and we put together what we believe is the most effective and efficient content funnel for brands. They need content on a daily basis. They need to be talking to authentic end users. We want your team to bring its most challenging problems and allow us and our team to apply our proven methods to your brand to take it to another level.